This is Mont De Lancey, a former farming property and museum set in foothills at Wandin North, an hour's drive east of Melbourne in the beautiful Yarra Valley. The farm was established in 1867 by a former stonemason, Henry Sebire, who emigrated to Australia from the island of Guernsey in 1850. The Sebires were one of a number of families who came to Wandin at this time and also established farms and orchards in the area. Henry Sebire had 9 children, one of whom, Thomas, married Linda Fairless in 1902, and their son, Reg, married Gwen Quayle in 1929. Between 1930 and 1951, Reg and Gwen Sebire had 9 children, 5 of whom were interviewed for this video. Linda, Greta, Alvan, Graeme and Valerie.
Well, Sebires were French originally, and we believe that's why they left France, because of the St Bartholomew's Day massacre, I think it was, where thousands of people were murdered because they were Protestant. Now people were Protestants, we believe, and they went over to Guernsey in the late 1500s or early 1600s. Henry, our great-grandfather, he left Guernsey in 1849. He went across to England in one of the little Guernsey sailing ships and got on one of the big sailing ships that came out here with 300 or 400 people on. He arrived early in 1850, built the first church in 1881, and his son, the son called Wandin, the first one that was born in Wandin, he helped with mixing the mortar and that sort of stuff. They called him after the district, after the name, Wandin. Well, the Sebire family back in Guernsey, where we came from, a long line in our family were stonemasons and bricklayers. So when they came to Australia, of course, Henry worked around Melbourne for a while in his brickworks and stonemasonry. And when they came to Wandin, they hadn't had much experience in actual farming, as a living. So our grandfather, Thomas Sebire, was sent to Burnley Horticultural School, which had only been running for a couple of years at that stage. And he was taught about pruning and grafting the different varieties onto the stocks. Henry's house was the first brick house built in the district, and the only reason that was because he was a bricklayer. If he had been a carpenter, well, it would have been a timber home and it would have fallen down by now. When he got established later on, he made the bricks and built a house. Now this is where the original house, when they first came to Wandin, was built. It was only built as a temporary house till they got established. This now has been built as a cooking kitchen. That was only built about 25 years ago. But this has been built to replicate what it would have been like in the old days. As they got the property developed, of course it was all bushland to start with, and they had to clear it, and the first thing they planted were raspberries. Originally the farm was 80 acres and extended through to Hunter Road down here. You can see the start of the driveway, and originally all the front area was planted in raspberries. The driveway continued on up this way, through here and round the back of the house, and other sheds for storing the berries in. Well, some of them were sent overseas and some were sent to the Melbourne market, and some were processed in the local area, in the local jam factories. On the other side of the property, there was a laneway planned to enter the property from the northern side, and that lane was called the Lancey Lane, and that was named after the area we came from in Guernsey originally. Well, when our father died in 1963, one of my brothers, Graeme, took over running the farm. He was the only one out of 5 boys that was into the farming business, and he grew a lot of cherries. All the packing is done here in Wandin on the original land, and this big shed you can see in the background is the new packing shed where all the cherries from the different properties, some from Mildura, some from Wangaratta and some from Tasmania, they all come here and they're packed here and they're sent all around the world. When they first came here in 1867, there was a severe drought, and it was very important to get a water supply, so they built a couple of wells around the place.
When great-grandfather built the well, it was built up, it had a crown on top and a little lid you could lift off. If you wanted jelly or anything like that, you put your jelly in a bucket, put a long rope on it, tied it on securely and lowered that down to just about the water height. And you could set a jelly down there because it was at least 10 or so degrees cooler down there. But I was always scared of the well that, you know, if you sat on it or anything or got too close to it, you'd fall in. I had a great fear of that.
Later on in 1927, they changed the farm from a fruit growing farm to a dairy farm.
That was a big change for us. You'd wake up in the morning and hear cows mooing because at this stage they were the Wandin Hygiene Dairy.
When they went into the dairy farm in 1927, they'd be working 7 days a week, morning, noon and night. I realise now that he was under a lot of pressure because they'd come through the Depression, there'd been First World War, the Second World War. They'd moved into the dairy business, which wasn't a great success because a lot of people didn't have money to pay for their milk at the end of the week. So he seemed to be a bit gruff at that stage, but, you know, I realise now that they'd been through some dreadful times, just sort of making enough money to survive on. He passed away in 1963. Then the years that followed that, there was 21 years that Mum had to bring up the younger members of the family.
The whole nine of us. I don't reckon any of us ever had a real blue with one another, did we?
No, I was one of the boys. I always played with the boys and Linda did the housework.
Like our dad was a very serious person, wasn't he?
Oh,
Very
yeah.
serious.
He really believed in religion. And
Total abstinence.
if Leon said something or did something, Leon got a thrashing.
Leon was a bit of a naughty boy.
There was a soft side of Dad when I turned, say, 11. It could have been long before he passed away, actually. On a Saturday night, there used to be something on the radio, I don't know what it was Dad's sort of music, and he pushed the furniture back and Mum would sit on the couch and he taught me the basic dance steps of dancing. It's the first time I think he'd ever really held me.
Mum never complained about anything, did she? She wasn't nasty or anything.
I remember her slapping me with the backs of the legs. I was sewing on the old treadle sewing machine. I had to unpick something 3 times and I blasphemed. And that she lost it. She just slapped me over the back. I would have been 13.
But the cowshed was used for numerous things after the cows were all sold to the market. In later years, when Dad replanted the orchard, there was a fruit grader in the cowshed. It was also changed into living quarters. We had a lot of backpackers would come and help with the picking during the picking season.
One of the strong things about the Wandin community is if they've needed something, they've gone out and done it. If they wanted a church, well, they built one. They wanted a public hall down the town, they built it. So the whole community have always been a community of doers.
They've been real decent people, haven't they?
Well, substantial people.
Yeah.
It was actually the Quayle family that started up the Rechabite Independent Order of Rechabites. Thomas Quayle was instrumental in getting that started up. Of course, a lot of the others, being Methodists and non-drinkers, they went along with it all.
Sunday afternoon, come in, you'd go to Sunday school and you'd go into church and you'd stay till the last verse of the first hymn or second.
Before the sermon.
Yeah, before the sermon. You got
Yeah.
Dad'd be doing his Rechabite books. Mum would be doing something about cakes or scones or something or other, and church was on the radio.
Oh, yeah.
And, Dad would whistle along a bit with some of the songs and all that. It was always a great feeling to come home from Sunday school and church. You always come home happy.
And Dad was a very brainy sort of a guy, and we had a lighting plant. It was a lot of batteries, and ran a motor and that charged up the batteries. And if Dad started the engines and made more power, we could iron. And it was my job to iron. I loved ironing.
I think it was really something special for us to be able to go to Box Hill Girls Tech. I used to walk from here to the station every day to catch the train, and it was a steam train. We caught the train, yes, at 7:15 in the morning, and got home at 20 to 7 at night.
We used to have great fun. I used to have a Annie Oakley book. I was Annie Oakley, of course. Mum used to make me Indian outfits out of hessian bags, and she'd embroider around the edges and make fringes around the edges. And when I was playing school, this was around the side veranda always. I used to write all over the walls with Dad's chalk that he used to mark the fruit boxes.
You were always expected, even when we, like from the age of about 4 or 5, we were always encouraged to help pick the berries because that was our livelihood. If we didn't get the berries picked and off to market in those the first days, well, so we were very young when we were encouraged to start, but we always got paid for it. We always had time for doing other things. Leon was always interested in, he was studying to be a radio engineer, and he'd bring bits of radio home, and we started off building little crystal sets, and I learned how to do that, and then little one-valve radio sets. He ended up being Commissioner for Broadcasting with the ABC, and he helped set up the SBS television channel.
Alvan, as a little boy, sat on the doorstep, the back doorstep there, and he had a tin whistle, and he could play any tune on this tin whistle. This is before he learnt anything about music. The dog would sit with him and howl.
In the late 1800s, they decided to start up a band, and one of our great uncles, John Sebire, is a teacher who was up at a place called Pine Lodge, and he was conducting the local brass band, and they were going to disband or something. And we've got letters of Thomas writing to him saying if they're going to sell their instruments, we'd buy them down here because they were wanting to start a brass band here. But that was in the 1897, around about that time. And they were doing jobs around. They'd go to the Lilydale races and things like that to perform, and the Yarra Glen races. And when the train was started, went through to Warburton, the first train, they went down to the station and played to that. Our grandfather Thomas, he played the cello and he played the clarinet.
We were all very happy here. We always felt comfortable at home, and everyone was always welcome. If, people respected us, and Mum and Dad especially. I mean, they would help everybody if they could, and just kind people.